This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com, and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, Halloween horror and what Allahu Akbar really means. Backed by popular demand, Daniel Greenfield, a Shillman Fellow at the David Horowitz Freedom Center and the editor of the blog The Point at frontpagemag.com. Daniel, welcome back under these very frightening and tragic circumstances.
These are less than happy circumstances, but I am happy to be back and to talk about these important issues.
Thank you, Daniel. So much to talk about. Your blog, brilliant blog. I encourage all of our viewers, read The Point at frontpagemag.com. Daniel, you've been really exposing at your blog and of course at Front Page as well, in terms of how the left has enabled and facilitated all of this on so many levels. And I want to get to that, and also how they try to, how the news media, we know Jake Tapper was one of them. They're trying to minimize what Allahu Akbar really means. And even on CNN, they keep saying that, this guy said God is great in Arabic, when in fact that's not what it means at all. I want to get to that. But before we begin, tell us about what you think. Let's just start with about this Saipov character being from Uzbekistan. Why is he in New York?
Well, we have a fantastic diversity of Islamic terrorists in New York. We have Islamic terrorists from Pakistan in New York. We have Islamic terrorists from Egypt in New York. We had Saudis flying planes into the World Trade Center, and we had an Egyptian-Palestinian opening fire on the observation deck of the Empire State Building. We've had a Bangladeshi plotting a bomb plot downtown. So really, we have this panoply of Islamic diversity. We have Muslims from all around the world diversely plotting various diverse terror plots. And this guy was actually from Paterson. Apparently, he was living in Paterson, New Jersey. Paterson is colloquially known as Patterstein, because you have the Palestinian flag flying over City Hall there. You have a sizable Palestinian population. And you had six of the 6 of the 9/11 hijackers actually living in Paterson. And you had celebrations when 9/11 happened in Paterson. So you can see why it was the perfect place for him to live.
Daniel, you're starting to imply something that's a little bit offensive, because the implication, a lot what you're saying, is that we shouldn't keep monitoring those nuns in the convents and those Buddhists around those Buddhist temples. You're suggesting that maybe law enforcement and counterterrorism operations should, have a disproportionate attention to maybe people that read Surah 9:5 and 9:29.
I know it's crazy. We all know that there's a very serious threat coming from Amish country, where they've got these handmade candles packaged together as TNT, and where they occasionally try to blow up ox carts. But the reality is that profiling, if you want to stop a crime, you actually figure out where the criminals are and what they're planning to do, and then you stop them. If, on the other hand, if you don't profile, then you have absolutely no idea what's happening and you can't actually stop anything. Now, once upon a time, the NYPD was actually really good at this stuff. The NYPD was so good at it that it was actually in some cases better than the FBI at going after these guys and breaking up terror plots. Of course, that was part of the Giuliani police reforms, which actually delivered fantastic results when it came to cracking down on crime. And then Giuliani was succeeded by Bloomberg, and Bloomberg was not great, but he wasn't absolutely terrible. And then Bloomberg was succeeded by a guy named Bill de Blasio. At least that's what he calls himself. That's not even his actual name. And he was a radical leftist, and he had close ties to a woman named Linda Sarsour and backing from the various Islamists. And at that point, really, it was a matter of time until the NYPD's ability to engage in actual counterterrorism was dismantled and the doctrines were stripped. And this is all the stuff that we're familiar with from the FBI. The doctrines get stripped out. There's no mention of Islam. You can't monitor mosques. You can't send in informants. You can't actually do anything to stop a terrorist attack. Now, once upon a time, the NYPD was actually monitoring in New Jersey, was monitoring in Jersey City, it was monitoring in Paterson, it was monitoring the very mosque where our wonderful friend from Uzbekistan, who brought his diversity to enrich New York and New Jersey, was actually praying. And here we are. The NYPD might very well have been able to stop it. Back in the day, NYPD undercover officers were taking pictures, they were observing, they were recording cars in parking lots, and they were monitoring it. And they stopped monitoring it, and 8 people are dead. Good work.
Daniel, from the time I was a kid till this moment, every time I study leftist ideas and what they spawn and engender in terms of earthly incarnations, you just see human blood, whether it's the Bolshevik Revolution, whether it's Stalin, whether it's the Halloween massacre. Whenever the left is involved in something, it's causing human blood. And now you mentioned de Blasio. Daniel, I don't know about you, but when a guy is screaming Allahu Akbar and then kills non-Muslims, and this is like the millionth guy that's done this, or, it depends what our time frame is, but we know that this has been happening for centuries, and also since 9/11, there's been more than 20,000 terrorist attacks perpetrated by people following the religion of peace. But after this, you would think that the first thing we need to do is start thinking about what Allahu Akbar means and what kind of a religion ideology this is. Now, Mayor de Blasio, right after the attack, came up with a really brilliant quote. Quote, "The last thing we should do is start casting dispersions on whole races of people or whole religions or whole nations. That will only make the situation worse." Daniel, all people know we, don't cast dispersions on whole races, but Islam is not a race. When he mentions whole religions, well, I don't know whether we want to call Islam a religion, whether we want to call it an ideology. I don't know. Maybe we should start, making some generalizations and doing something about it when a religion is telling its people to smite unbelievers.
There's just maybe some faint possibility that we should try doing that maybe we should respond to the bombs, the shootings, the stabbings by actually casting some aspersions, because the reality is we've tried this whole attitude of pretending that nothing is wrong, pretending that Islam has absolutely nothing to do with Islamic terrorism, and it hasn't worked at all. I mean, we're on the 16th anniversary of September 11th, and we have yet another terrorist attack in New York City, fairly close to the ground zero. So clearly appeasement isn't working, denial is not working, refusing to detail or discuss any of the connections between Islamic terrorism and Islam is not working, refusing to quote Islamic terrorism is not working, pretending these people are just a band of random criminals and lunatics, just lone wolves, entire packs of lone wolves roaming America and Europe, isn't working. None of this is working. So A, we can try doing what works, or B, we can continue piling up the corpses and seeing the tide of blood flowing. And, what's the worst that could happen, Brother Blasio asks? Well, we could stick around. We could stick around and wait until there are more Uzbeks and more Pakistanis and more Palestinians and more Egyptians and Moroccans and the Libyans and Lebanese and Yemenis in New York, and we're going to find out what else could happen. I mean, we were already finding out in Paris. We're finding out in London. Now we're finding out a bit more in New York. We're going to keep finding out, because this kind of diversity, it's not our strength, it's our weakness.
And I want to add something to that, Daniel, in terms of how the left immediately wants to throw the racist label. Because what you're saying there, people will say, oh, he's so racist, he's so racist. Daniel, we can also add white people to what you just said as well, because any race can start reading the hadiths and start reading the Quran. This problem is about a theology / ideology / belief system that any race can follow. And it's, in one of your own articles, you pointed out a very good fact that, one could even argue, about what the race of Muhammad even was.
Of course, actually a number of the recent terror attacks in New York, Islamic terror attacks in New York, were carried out by converts. We just had a convert who was caught in a plot attempting to bomb a Miami mall. We've had a number of attacks by Islamic converts. One of the earlier post-9/11 attacks in New York were actually by the Newburgh Four, who were a group of converts to Islam. And we've had serious terror attacks by Islamic converts in Europe. So it's very much an issue. And as you said, this is an ideology, it's a belief system. But there are particular areas where this belief system comes from, where this belief system is strong, and that's why you have things like the Muslim travel pause or the travel ban or whatever you want to call it, which seeks to interdict travel from places where this belief system is prevalent. And again, this makes perfect sense because during World War II, would you accept people from Nazi Germany who were Nazis? Would you accept, during the Cold War, should we have accepted people who were communists? In fact, if you want to come to America, you actually have to pledge that you were not a member of the Communist Party. And this makes complete and total sense because why would you accept people who carry a belief system that calls for your destruction, your conquest, and your enslavement?
Absolutely. And look, I want to make such a concrete, it's so important to make a concrete point here because I find that in our culture, there's, the left has brainwashed our culture so much that even in the media, even Geraldo Rivera was doing this the other evening against Pamela Geller on a segment on Hannity. There's this immediate thing how, but you shouldn't demonize all Muslims. You shouldn't hate all Muslims. We have to stop doing this against all Muslims. The left has succeeded in conflating Islam and Muslims in this entire debate. So when somebody says something about Islam, right away they're slandered as if they're saying something against all Muslims. We really got to fight this because this is BS propaganda. Islam is an idea. Muslims are people. There are many, many people who are labeled, who go by the label of Muslim, who might have had this label put on them when they were born. They might not know anything about the Quran. They might not believe everything in the Quran. I know many of these people, quote unquote, that are Muslim, that are just peaceful, good people. Those are not the people we are speaking about. We're not speaking about a whole group of people. We're speaking about Islam and the danger it represents when people follow its violent commands.
We are speaking, as you've said, first and foremost about an ideology, and it's the ideology that's the problem. And I think part of this, what we're dealing with really is this kind of immediate jump to the feelings of followers of Islam, whatever name we go with. And frankly, that's not the core issue. The core issue right now that we're dealing with is that 8 people were murdered just right now, and we should be really putting them first. We should be putting their families first. We should be putting the wounded first. We have this kind of whole perverse media narrative in which we jump from every terrorist attack to the usual Muslims fear blowback narrative. And that prevents any kind of actual discussion about Islam because right away we jump to Muslims are the real victims of the attack. And obviously not all Muslims believe everything that the Quran teaches. Not all of them are about to start implementing all of it. Most people tend to just accept things, and this goes across a range of religions. Most people tend to accept things unthinkingly for a variety of religions or belief systems or worldviews in general. And people don't necessarily think about them, and they don't necessarily want to make commitments to actually carry them out. But at the same time, Islam very much does have beliefs that call for these acts, and these acts are interlinked with Islam. So there's no way to avoid that, and we actually do need to have a conversation about that if we're going to stop them.
Absolutely, Daniel. And what I'm doing here, you're so right, is because we need to be talking about jihad and its victims, but because of the unholy alliance between the left and Islam and how it rules our national discourse and cultural discourse, all of a sudden Muslims always become the main victims, when in fact we're not even talking about necessarily Muslims. We're talking about Islam. And I also want to say in your work, you've pointed out very importantly that the left has also succeeded in racializing Islam. And Islam is not even a race. So now if you say something about Islam, all of a sudden you're a racist that's talking about all Muslims. We really got to fight this propaganda. And let's keep discussing that. But Daniel, I got to close the show. And I want to at least be honest with our guests because we got to get to the title of our show and the main theme of our show. But we'll give them some very good, profound stuff right now. So this guy was screaming, Allahu Akbar. We know that the establishment media waters this down and lies about it. Jake Tapper was reminding everybody that Allahu Akbar can be very beautiful. I wonder if Tapper would think it was very beautiful if he was on a plane and on the wrong side of the cockpit when Muslim terrorists are screaming Allahu Akbar and trying to break into that cockpit. I'm using a metaphor and an example used by you in one of your articles. Tell us about the real meaning of this term.
So this is a routine media mistranslation, and it's not just the media. I remember Senator McCain talking about how Al-Akbar is just, God is great, it's just a positive exclamation. Of course, that's wrong on 2 counts. First of all, assuming that Allah means the same thing as God is itself a fundamental error, but I'll get to that in a moment. And obviously, Akbar, that's not a reference to Allah is just great. I mean, it's just great. Allah, he's great, isn't he? It's more Allah is greater. Allah Akbar, he's greater. What is he greater than? He is greater than your God. This phrase originates actually to one of Muhammad's attacks on the local Jewish community, and he managed to ambush the Jews locally, and he declared Allah Akbar. Now, he was saying that the God of Islam is greater than the God of the Jews. And this already actually points out that whatever God Muslims worship, whatever Allah is not the same as the God of the Jews, because otherwise why declare that my God is greater than your God if Muslims and Jews and Christians follow all the same religion and have the same God? So clearly that's not the case. So first of all, Allah does not mean God as we would understand it. And second of all, it means greater. It means that Allah is greater. It means that Allah is superior. It means that Allah is superior to your God and to your religion. Now, what's the relevance of all this? This is just a boast. My God can beat up your God. How do Muslims prove that Allah is greater than your God? Well, they do it in a very simple way. They do it by killing you, the way that Muhammad killed and oppressed and terrorized the Jews, and the way that the people who are screaming Allahu Akbar in the streets of London, the streets of Paris, in the streets of New York, and all across America and Europe prove it. They prove it by killing Jews and Christians. They prove it by killing those who don't worship Allah. And when they do that, when they succeed in doing that, then they demonstrate that Allah is greater. Because the thing to understand about Islam, it is a very fundamentally military religion. Muslims don't prove the truth of their faith through miracles. It's not the Exodus. It's not the Ten Commandments. It's not any miracles as we would understand them so much. I mean, Islam has some miracles in it, but that's not really the way Muslims prove things. They prove things by conquering and defeating their enemies. Thus, if Muslims defeat Jews and Christians, they prove that Allah is greater than the God of the Jews and the Christians. When they defeat Hindus and Buddhists and so on and so forth, and they shout Allah Akbar, they're proving that Allah is superior. That's the essence of Allah Akbar.
Daniel Greenfield, when will Anderson Cooper, Don Lemon, Rachel Maddow, Chris Matthews invite you, Robert Spencer, Bosch Foston, and Nani Darwish for a discussion on the real meaning of Allahu Akbar?
I'm thinking right about 5 minutes before they want to lose their job and be barred from any kind of future work in the media, because that's just stuff you cannot discuss in the media. The media has a very firm narrative, and we've seen this over and over again after every terrorist attack. There's a brief focus on the actual shock. They will put some of the video on, they will put some of the pictures on. Usually they'll try to say, let's not jump to any conclusions. In this case, though, of course, the conclusions have been completely and thoroughly jumped to, because not only was this guy running around shouting Allahu Akbar, he left a note stating that he did it for ISIS, and now he's apparently requesting to have an ISIS flag in his hotel, in his hospital room. So the conclusions have been jumped to. Next, they will briefly, very briefly touch on the victims. Then they'll pivot to Muslims condemn this, and Muslims are the real victims of the attack. And then finally, we should move on. We should forget about this. We're stronger than this. We're so strong that we don't have to pay attention or think about this. So the media follows this very familiar narrative. There's no room for any of the stuff that we discuss in that narrative. There's no room for your writings on it. There's no room for my writings. There's no room for Robert's work or for Bosch's testimony. It just doesn't belong there, because their narrative is, of course, that we have this wonderful tapestry of diversity, and these people really just want to ruin our wonderful diversity. They want to ruin our wonderful society, in which we're becoming more and more diverse, and we should just forget about this because it's an inconvenient fact.
And they will sprinkle in global warming, unemployment, racism, discrimination, and a little bit of climate change, because it might be a little bit different than global warming. Who knows how they think lately in their bizarre and treacherous world. Daniel Greenfield, thanks so much for joining us this evening.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you. And thank you for watching the Glazov Gang. Please remember, we're a fan-generated program. We're here because of you. So please support our program at jamieglazov.com. And make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel of the Glazov Gang. And our heartfelt thanks goes out to Benjamin Poser for sponsoring this program. We are very grateful for your generosity, and it's because of people like you, Benjamin, that the Glazov Gang keeps moving forward. Thank you, Benjamin Poser. And we'll see you soon on the Glazov Gang. Good night.